pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cooper.
Here.
Councilmember Beaton.
Here.
Mayor Zelinski.
Here.
Councilmember Sipsick.
Here.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Here.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Here.
City Manager.
Here.
City Attorney.
Here.
DPW Director.
Here.
Finance Director.
Here.
Public Safety Director.
Here.
City Engineer.
Thank you. Before we go any further, we have a request to amend the agenda, a motion to amend the agenda, to consider introduction of some new city employees. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes, we'll be
Mo-
placing
Motion approved.
that under new business, first item under new business. Citizens comment on agenda-related items. Is there any citizen who would like to comment on agenda-related items? Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Approach the podium and state your name and address. Seeing none. Consent agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by city manager to be routine matters. Prior to approval of the consent agenda, any member of council may have an item from the consent agenda removed and taken up during the regular portion of the meeting. Consent agenda items include approval of minutes, payroll, invoice, notification regarding next work session. At this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a motion?
Approved.
Have a motion? Have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion second. Any discussion on it? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes,
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
thank you. Consideration of introducing new members. This Public Safety Director.
Well, thank you. On behalf of the Manistee City Fire Department, I'd like to introduce our newest hire. Today was actually his first day. I think you've heard a little bit about him. Just give you a little synopsis. He's 31 years old. He's from Sheboygan. He has his firefighter training already done. He's been a firefighter for a little while. He's been doing a little bit of carpentry work right now full-time before he's come here to the city of Manistee. He's also an EMT. We'll have to put him through paramedic training. But John stood out during the process, which is a long, arduous process that we do here at the City of Manistee Fire Department. And we're glad that he accepted our offer, and we look forward to the next 25, 30, 50 years that he'll be with us, so 50 years. One thing that I like to do, and we did it with our last captain promotion, is what we like to say is pinning a badge. And this is his first day, and of course, why not? We have, John, why don't you stand up? John Robitek, his wife Tiffany is here with us. She'll be doing the pinning. His daughter Naylee is also here. John's mom and dad are here, and his mother and father-in-law here for the pinning ceremony. At this time, Tiffany, if you'd stand up and pin the badge. Congratulations, John. Welcome to the team.
On behalf of City Council, welcome. Mr. Bradford.
Council, as you know, longtime Executive Secretary Cindy Lokovich is going to be retiring in December. And Kelly McCall, who used to be the city's utility billing clerk, got a promotion, will be taking that position. So we would like to introduce Kaylee Owens. We hired her for the utility billing and accounts receivable clerk. Kaylee's from Manistee and has a long track record of excellent customer service and a financial background as well, undergraduate business degree. We're really excited to have her on board. So I just wanted to introduce Kaylee. If you want to say a few words, introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing me onto the team. I'm excited. So I look forward to meeting each one of you and everyone out here too, so.
Well, welcome. Let's give her a big hand. Okay. Consideration of annual audit committee report. The council audit committee is established by section 23 of the city council guidelines. This section spells out the duties and responsibilities of the committee. As part of the responsibility, the audit committee prepares a written report on how the committee discharges duties and responsibilities. At this time, council could take action to accept the annual report of the council audit committee. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next, we have a presentation by Ken Talsma of Anderson Trackman on the June 30th audit.
Thank you. We got it right.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you guys for having me here to present.
Sure, thank you.
Anybody else want a hard copy of the graphical part? Again, for 2019, Anderson Tackman was engaged to do the financial statement audit. As most governments, like cities and school districts and counties and townships, they have to have a annual audit of all of its accounting records each year, and provided a copy of that report to the state to make sure that there's assurance that there's evidence to support all the numbers. There's tests of the systems and making sure that the controls are operating and that the state's regular or recommended procedures for accounting for the collection of all receipts and monies is a good and adequate system, as well as the disbursement of money, payroll systems and all those things are working, and have the checks and balances that are necessary and adequate to make sure that you're able to make good financial records and do those timely and fairly accurately on an annual basis. So then at the end of the audit that we do, as we get the assurance on the numbers and do our tests, look at a lot of evidence, and we look at information from third-party groups like the banks you deal with, and we confirm all the bank accounts with every bank you do business with, and also the debtors of the city, also some of the grantors like the state of Michigan. And then we are able to give assurance on the statements and say that there's an opinion on their accuracy, and there's always the four kinds. There's the adverse when there's problems and it doesn't quite work out and there's issues with certain areas. There's a disclaimer when there isn't information totally to say whether something's right or wrong. There's a modified, which means usually everything's okay except for maybe one area is a little bit weaker or inadequate. And then there's the unmodified type, which is the best or the highest opinion we can give. And that's what the city got again this year for 2019 was the unmodified opinion, which is what you would want. The next thing I'll get into is the graphical presentation. We usually do these to present the information, the financial statements, and it allows us to kind of compare this year to last year and talk about any changes of interest. The first one shows all the assets of the entire city, for the whole combined city, and it shows the cash and equivalents pretty comparable, both restricted and unrestricted. Your investments, unrestricted and restricted. It's a large amount of your investments are with the oil and gas fund with that trust agreement. And then you have your accounts receivable from customers like the water and sewer customers, due from governmental units like the state of Michigan or other grantors, we have prepaid items, which are usually insurance or prepaid agreements that will provide value to another accounting period afterwards, so it's an asset until used. Inventory, which is different things like materials or fuel that's on hand at year end, that again is an asset for the next period. And then there's capital assets, which like most cities is one of the biggest categories because you have a lot of buildings, equipment, infrastructure, both water, sewer, streets that allow you to provide services to the citizens of the city. And like most governments, that's kind of one of the biggest asset areas. Then we have the liabilities of the city. We have accounts payable, which took quite a bump this year. I think we had an increase in the payables of the general fund, I think of about $170,000, and the water and sewer fund was up about $560,000 for accounts payable. So with the additional things going on with those two funds, we just had more payables at the end of the year than last. We also have accrued liabilities, which is the accrued salaries and related taxes. We have due from governmental units or two governmental units. Customer deposits, which are usually monies put on hand for like the water and sewer funds to deposit for them to get service, and then they usually get that once they no longer have the service, but it's held by the city kind of in fiduciary capacity during their term of service. We have unearned revenue, which usually is money that's given but not yet due to the city until the service requirements are met. And then there's capital leases payable, which I believe is a small piece of equipment that's paid over time. Continuing with the liabilities of the city, we have notes payable for pieces of equipment, bonds payable, which went down from about 16 million to about 14 million. I think we had no new debt issued for 2019. We just had roughly around a couple million paid down in principal payments for the year. So got quite a bit of debt paid off for 2019. The pension liabilities spiked up. Always mention the pension information that MERS does is presented on the calendar year basis. So the most recent information they have for you is at December 31st of 2018. Your fiscal year is June 30, so there's that 6-month lag, but because that's the most recent actuarial information, that's what's used in the audit report. And of course, something to take in context is at the end of December last year, there's quite a huge loss with the stock market. So things were quite down, which makes this look a bit worse than it is. Even 3 months later in March, it rebounded quite a bit. And even now, it's quite a bit better. But that liability is kind of to show you a snapshot of how the pension's doing in its totality at the point in time of your fiscal year. So it takes the assets and then whatever obligations are measured and shows how it's funded at a point in time. There's the OPEB liability, $89,000. That's employee health insurance that they are due when they leave employment and head into retirement. And then we have employee benefits, which is sick and vacation time accrued due to them, at about $341,000, and then deferred inflows. And we'll also talk about there's outflows, and these are kind of like deferred gains and losses with the pension system that the actuarial companies also take into consideration, not only the obligation for that, but there's certain things that are related gains and losses that they amortize over a period of maybe 2 to 3 to 5 years, and then they write that off against the pension liability over that period of time. So there's a lot that goes into that pension liability, and also some other things that they will account for in these other categories. So that's what they usually have for deferred inflows and outflows. Next, we have the equity of the entire city, and the three biggest components are the net investment capital assets, which is your equity in all the infrastructure and buildings and equipment, the biggest category, and that went from 23 to about 25 million. Restricted, which lands at about 9.2 million, up from 8.3. And the restricted is anything that's kind of earmarked or kept in a separate bucket by either grantor or debtor agreement or outside conditions, like the oil and gas trust that has its own criteria that will be kept separate. And any monies that those kind of areas make, they have to remain intact and kept in those categories as what's called restricted. And then what's left is the unrestricted, which pretty much can be used free and clear for the operation of the city. Then we have the revenues next, all the government revenues. So in taxes up a little bit, I think you had about a 2.6% increase in taxable values for 2019, so a little bit of a bump there. The license and permit revenue stayed pretty level. Federal sources was a bit better in 2019. You landed about 110,000 federal sources, up from 17 last year. State sources also did a bit better, 2,087,000. One of the biggest areas of state revenue is your revenue sharing the general fund gets, and you also get money for the major street funds and the local street funds, which is basically money from gas taxes. Local sources also pretty level. Charge for service is down a little bit, and those are the fees collected by the different departments of the city. Interest and rents did better, went up about 280,000. I think the oil and gas fund accounted for most of that jump. It had quite a bit better year as far as different interest earnings and gains for 2019. And then other revenue stayed pretty level at about 277,000. Next, expenditures of all the government funds, and we have legislative with the city council landing at about 51,000. General government, which holds all the departments like the treasurer, clerk, elections, building and grounds, a lot of the general functions landing pretty close to last year. Public safety, which holds police and fire, landing about 2.5 million. Public works took quite a bit of a decrease this year, down to about 2.7. And I think the largest decrease was the expenditure in the local streets fund. We didn't have quite as much, I guess, construction or expenses on the local streets as we did in 2018. Otherwise, everything else was pretty comparable in the general and the major street funds. Rec and culture, pretty level. Those are things like for parks and different other arts and cultural things. Other expenditures landed pretty close to last year, 147,000. Capital outlay, which is the purchase of anything like capital assets, building equipment, hard assets, about 15,000. Then debt service went down from last year to 635,000. As we had some principal paid off, and I think also we had one of the debts was split better between the water and sewer fund, I think, in 2019. So there was some reclassification causing part of that. But next is water and sewer, showing its revenues down a little bit from last year, 4.4 to 4.1 million. The interest and rents of the water sewer fund pretty level, and then the state grants down from about 440,000 to 362, and we're getting grants for the storm asset and water management grant, and also I think for the water sewer pilot grant too, but it's not quite as much as obviously as it's been in the last couple of years. Then the expenditures, water and sewer, showing personnel took a little bit of an increase to 995,000. Those are the different personnel and fringes allocated to water and sewer. And I always say there's sometimes a movement between the expenses for the employees between the Department of Public Works and the general fund, as well as the street funds and the water and sewer, as those people are kind of shared between these three areas. So as depending on where they're spending their time and doing their work, you can have more expenses in one area and less in another. Contracted services went down, and one of the things causing the biggest decrease, I think overall the expenditures between the water and sewer fund are pretty close the last 3 years. But as you've been working with the USDA for the new water sewer projects that you're getting into here into the future, they've required some more reclassification of the expenditure categories. So we've had some expenses moved out of contractor services, as you'll see in the miscellaneous. I think some things that were in utilities were also moved, and maybe a couple other categories. But overall, the expenses of the fund are staying pretty close, as I'll show on the next page. But you can see with insurance, administration, equipment rental, supplies, those are pretty comparable. And then continuing on, the expenses, utilities went down as we've had a shift from that area into miscellaneous per the USDA's presentation preference, I guess. And then repair and maintenance expenses, pretty level, $224,000, as we have to make sure the system is taken care of and updated and maintained. Depreciation expense did go down, about 1.2 million to 1.57. The miscellaneous, as I said, went up as we've had some of these other categories classified into this area. And then interest expense also went up, largely because we had the movement of that one debt that was recorded in the general government side. Now it's partially here in the water side. But like I said, overall in 18, you had about 4.2 million, 34,000 in expenses for the total water and sewer. And at the end of all this reclassification, you still have about 2,222,000. So you're just down still a bit, about $12,000 from last year, but that's how the water and sewer panned out. Then the last graph is the fund balance of the general fund. And we always say as auditors, or there's a rule of thumb from the U.S. Finance Officers Administration, people always wonder like what level of fund balance is good to have. Some people worry, is it too high, too low, where should it be? And usually the rule of thumb is that they don't want it to go lower than 10 to 15% of next year's budgeted expenditures and transfers out to other funds. So they want to make sure you don't go below that, because then they think you're maybe not in a safe spot. So you guys are, I think, about 30 in the 30% range right now. You kind of have built up in the last couple of years, which isn't too odd. It's kind of cyclical. You have years where you will build up and save towards projects, and then you'll use that to buy things or do projects, and it can go back down. The one thing to note, though, that the state of Michigan's done in the last couple of years is if they see you have losses or 3 years in a row that it goes down, they'll send you a letter saying they're concerned about the city and what's going on there, and if you guys are having problems and what you're doing to address it. So it's kind of good to make sure that you don't have 3 years in a row of decreases if possible. Otherwise, they'll want to know what's going on, and you'll have to write a lot of correspondence to explain what your situation is. But they don't seem to, interfere too much beyond that. And maybe that's just their way of monitoring the local governments to make sure you're doing okay. But I think overall, your health financially for the city looks pretty good. They said the taxable values, which is a big thing for the city. So you had a little bit of an increase, 2.6%. The state revenue sharing is staying pretty solid. It's not going down for you. Also, your money for the street funds seems to be staying at pretty good levels. And it seems like you guys do quite a bit with the different grants, and both whether it's federal, state, and local money. You seem to be pretty active in that area, trying to get different money where you can for different things, no matter how big or small. So that's, I think, is done pretty well for the city, again, for 2019. Any other questions?
Any questions?
No, I think I would like to thank Councilmember Aaron Pontiac and Mick Szymanski for serving on the audit committee with me, and all the due diligence that Ed has done on it, as well as your services. I think it went pretty smoothly.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. And I only add, to conclude my presentation, we appreciate the hard work of all the staff here at the city, Mr. Bradford and all the people and downstairs pulling the information and getting everything ready and helping us with our questions and get all the evidence we need so we can do our audit and give you your opinion. Everybody is very efficient and fast at getting us what we need, and very transparent, and we appreciate their help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Consideration of approving a contract for the 2019-2020 street improvement project. The city has publicly bid out street improvements for 2019-2020. The project includes construction of storm sewer and reconstructing a portion of Fremont, Third Avenue, and Hastings Street. Two bids were received as follows. Elmer's Crane and Dozer, $401,098.62. Hellac Contracting, $358,205. The engineer's estimate is $370,799.50. The Public Works Department and City Engineer are recommending the contract award to the low bidder. The contract documents were prepared by Spicer Group and approved by the city attorney. At this time, council could take action to award a construction contract to the low bidder, Hellac Contracting Incorporated, in the amount of $358,205, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the documents. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes. Mayor Zelinski, I have two questions. I'm just curious if you can hazard a guess as to why there'd be like a $40,000 difference in between these two bids.
No.
No, you don't want to?
There's a lot that goes into these bids for the contractors. Elmer's has been pretty successful in the past and honestly does the majority of our work. They use different subcontractors. Sometimes a lot of work that Elmer's does is in-house, but they use several subcontractors. I know that Halleck uses typically a different paving company and possibly a different concrete company. A lot of that has to do with how they mobilize, how it fits into their schedule, subcontractor costs. So we were hoping to get more bids than that, but we've got one that's just above the estimate and one just below, so we're pretty satisfied.
Okay. My second question is, I want to have a thorough understanding of how this ties into the sewer, correcting the sewer issues that are in that area.
Okay. So the capital improvement and the transportation improvement plans that we put together, you understand we forecast those out 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We try to mesh them together. We try to mesh lots of different opportunities for funding. This project started in the the Fremont, Hughes, First, Second Avenue area when council provided $200,000 from the oil and gas fund. We then tried to, and that was intended to improve the storm sewer and then rebuild local streets. As we got into the rural development phase 1 project, we realized that those funds were eligible for the rural development project and provided the necessary benefits for the wet weather corrective action program that we needed. So we then said, okay, well, where else in the city can we relocate those funds, have impact on local streets, and do some improvements with storm sewer? We selected the Hastings and Third Avenue project and applied for a Category B MDOT grant, which was a new category of grant funding that specifically went to local streets, had preference for utility upgrades that were occurring below them. We were not successful in receiving that funding. At the same time, as we were designing the rural development phase 1B contract, which is the Hughes, portions of Second Avenue, Fremont, that kind of area, we became aware that we had set aside local funds to match items that we did not think would be eligible through rural development, such as a couple blocks of street and some water main work. We found out that those are eligible funding, and so we were able to extend that project 2 blocks on First Avenue to catch another very large area that ponds every spring before the frost leaves the ground, and then use the money that we were going to match the Category B to do the project that's before you tonight. So everything that we intended to do, we're able to do with the funds. It kind of ebbs and flows until we get everything signed, documented, and bid out. And we actually were able to add even more to it.
So what is gonna be done with the sewers there?
So primarily this project is to reconstruct reconstruct Hastings, which is in literally horrible condition. It's back to gravel. However, to do that and to protect the new asphalt, we need to drain it. So we want to extend storm sewer. The best place for us to extend the storm sewer is to tie in at 3rd Avenue on the west end, almost to where Monroe Street is.
Okay,
So there's a small portion where we're gonna bury pipe from the end of 3rd Avenue back to Hastings and then south for a block and a half. And then those will get repaved and Hastings will be reconstructed.
okay. All right, and when is this work gonna start?
So that'll start in the spring of 2020, if approved tonight.
Okay, so it'll still be in this fiscal year that it's gonna be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
But when's Quincy gonna be, and what year is it scheduled for Quincy?
That's in our transportation improvement program, I believe, for 2022. So that it hasn't moved up, it hasn't moved back, it's been maintained. One of the things that we need in order to construct that is we're planning on doing a drinking water revolving fund application, which will pay for a number of those water improvements. And the entire length of Quincy Street will have upgraded sanitary sewer, new storm sewer, and water main. So we've got to wait till that water funding is available.
Anything else? Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes,
Councilmember Sipsick. Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of directing staff to negotiate a new refuge collection agreement with Republic Services. City Council created an ad hoc refuge committee to review and make recommendations on refuge collection in the city. The committee has recommended a change for residential collection. This change would include providing every resident a refuge tote. Residents will be able to opt out of the program by purchasing City of Manistee 30-gallon trash bags. At this time, council could take action to authorize city staff to negotiate a new refuge collection agreement with Republic Services to convert residential refuge collection to mandatory cart services and opt-out options to utilize City of Manistee trash bags. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
this is going to take place when?
This will likely be a spring rollout, probably in the April timeframe. We need a little bit of time to get the information out to everybody, actually negotiate the amendment to that contract and bring it back to you. And then, excuse me, we need to have bags manufactured. So I don't think the winter time is the best time to do that. So I would think as soon as the weather breaks and we're starting to get towards spring. Yes.
Will there be negotiations as well on the recycling?
The recycling isn't a part of that. What this specifically does, their contract ends at the end of June 2020, so next summer. We'll be negotiating their new contractor in the wintertime this year. However, this, because it would roll out before July 1st, is something we would amend the current contract and then included in the future contract. What we do have going on with recycling right now is we've got an agreement with Manistee Catholic Central, who currently collects cardboard through the PCA program, and they receive funds for that cardboard collection. The city manager reached out to them and offered that we collect a lot of cardboard at our recycling center, that we pay $12,000 to $14,000 a year for somebody to take away. So we offered them, if we could combine forces, they could increase their the amount of tonnage that they're bringing in and increase the amount of revenue. So we've got an agreement with them. We currently have poured a pad to set the commingled dumpster at MCC, and they're working out with Packaging Corporation to receive possibly a second trailer to accept that additional load. I'm working on signage right now with Amores to do some signage where we would transition our entire recycling center down to MCC. That should be a $14,000 or so reduction to our refuse collection. And we would still have the commingled, so the cost there would be the same. What I'm looking at doing, and I've been working with Republic on it, is they've got a dumpster that does not get used during the wintertime for the commingled. So we may do a period where we've got a dumpster at each location till people get used to it and can see the signage and don't have to just show up, turn around, and drive to the other side of town.
There were some numbers, the cost of these totes that we talked about in previous meetings. Is that what you're gonna be negotiating, or have those numbers changed?
Those numbers might be a little bit smaller because they're, right? Because the numbers that we use in comparison were if they were implemented on July 1st of 2020. Because we're bringing it in a little bit earlier, those numbers might be a little less and then would be readjusted on July 1st.
Do you hazard a guess about what a little bit less is?
I don't know at this
Okay.
time.
That
That would be part of the negotiation.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Jeff, are they gonna, with the people who decide to opt out, are they gonna send them notices to everybody and say, are you opting out, you're gonna take the tolls, you're gonna opt out? What?
We will have to do kind of a publicity campaign where we get that out in the newspaper, Facebook, website, and try to get information out so that if people do decide to opt out, they know how to do that and they know how to get the bags.
If a person doesn't want to use the mandatory cart service and they want to opt out, they can still put, if they buy a city bag for the week, they can put that in their regular trash container and put that still out at the curb.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. McCall. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of a, excuse me, consideration of a block party at Cafe 1907 and Sings Marina. Oh, I missed one. Consideration of adopting the branding toolkit for the city of Manistee as proposed by the Project Rising Tide Initiative. At a work session on October 8, 2019, council members discussed the adoption of a new brand for the city. This agenda request is made to officially adopt the brand logo selected so city staff can start making the changes and updates required. At this time, council could take action to adopt the Project Rising Tide proposed logo for the city of Manistee and officially update the city brand. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Nope, just ready here if you got any questions on rolling it out.
Could you kind of roll through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the 8th, we went over the proposals that the consultant, delivered to us. And this was kind of the decision and kind of the official image that was selected not only for the city but also for the community. I have been communicating with Ed Bradford so we could talk about, you know, the rollout, how are we gonna put it out there? And then staff will work in updating all of the city forums and city image overall. So it's just pretty short, going back to the selection that it was made originally, and then staff will make the decision of progressively adopting it. If you approve, of course.
Any questions? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the block party. Consideration of a block party by Cafe 1907 and Sings Marina for the Stomp Out Cancer Fund. Cafe 1907 and Sings Marina has requested authorization to conduct a block party on Friday, December 6, 2019 at 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. to benefit the Stomp Out Cancer Fund. This event will be held in the parking lot on the corner of River and Cross Street. The event is a family-friendly event and will include the appearance by Santa, along with a band and fire pit. Wristbands will be distributed to those over 21 years of age, as beer, wine, and spirits will be available for purchase. At this time, council could take action to support and approve the request to use city services, park, and streets for Cafe 1907 Sings Marina Block Party to benefit Stomp Out Cancer Fund on Friday, December 6, 2019, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., subject to appropriate department approvals.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sipsick,
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Notices, communication, and announcement. Tonight, we're gonna have a report from the Pay Commission. Mr. Barry Lynn.
Thank you, council members. I'm gonna get right into this since I'm supposed to be 10 minutes and I've got 16 slides. I know that's gonna be a challenge.
We like looking at pictures.
First, I just to start off with PEG. So the question I probably get asked most is, what is it? What does it stand for? So just a gentle reminder that PEG stands for Public Education Government. As that term evolved in the 1980s, kind of with the advent of cable, and kind of that was the birth of public access television, there weren't other venues for getting public content out to the public in this format. Same thing for education. So there historically was a lot more emphasis on those areas. Government's always been an emphasis. As we've evolved, the government piece and the recording of meetings and the broadcasting of meetings is primarily what we've evolved to, because now you've got YouTube and Facebook and tons of other channels for the public to get their message out there. But governments are still, not all that tech savvy in a lot of ways and aren't using those other means. So that's kind of where we focus on. The current commission makeup, we are a commission of 5 people. We currently have 1 vacant seat. I'm chair of the commission, and I'm also currently acting as interim director while we go through our strategic planning process, which is what I'm going to be spending most of my time talking about. And I want to thank city staff and specifically Heather for joining us in the last year as the city liaison. It's been very helpful having her attending meetings, but just providing access to the inner workings of city staff as is necessary. Past year, things that have happened of note. Back in May, you approved a change in the bylaws that reduced the commission size from 7 to 5. That finally really enabled us to get going again, because we had 4 members with a commission of 7. That meant 4 was our quorum. So if any person couldn't make a meeting, we didn't have a meeting, and that happened fairly regularly. We've now gone to 5, and with 4 members right now, we can at least have one person gone, and we can still conduct meetings and keep moving forward. So that's made a huge, huge progress this year. And it's really enabled us to work through our strategic planning process, which we started basically a year ago, back in November of last year. And the final report of that came out by our consultant in August. And since then, we've been starting through the process of working through the action items in that strategic plan. The plan itself is kind of like step 1, and now it's really up to us as members of the commission to really flush out some of its actions. Out of that strategic planning process, a new vision statement and a new mission statement, which are the next 2 slides. So the vision of PEG is to serve as a publicly accessible repository of source information about governmental actions, decisions, local events, and community activities. And that repository of source information is kind of more technical speak, but it basically means we're capturing the raw content, unfiltered, unedited. Here is what it is. Videos of meetings like this and other meetings. Mission statement. PEG provides unedited, unfiltered, original content to be consumed by the general public through a variety of relevant content platforms. And by content platforms, it's potentially a lot of things. Historically, we've been, on Charter. We've had a presence on the web and YouTube now for about 5 years, but we're not yet on Facebook. And new platforms and technology are coming up every day, and trying to understand where we fit in is part of the process we're continuing to work on. As part of our strategic planning, we went through a SWOT analysis, as is very typical in these types of events. Here are some of the highlights of that. Under strengths, we provide transparency through raw information, unlike any other media outlet. Everything else is trying to distill down, which tonight like an hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours if it's a DDA meeting, down to something that's kind of small content. You lose a lot of context when you do that. This is kind of the raw footage. We have platforms that we can currently utilize. We are blessed that we have actually a public access cable television channel that we can use in a variety of ways. Our website, YouTube, are other things that we're currently utilizing. Weaknesses. Limited unknown audience. We really don't have a good way of knowing who's accessing our content, especially on Charter. On YouTube, we get a little bit more information because it's online, but on the cable channels, and the one information that Charter used to be capturing, they've stopped capturing, so we've even got less than we used to. There's not a lot of communication regarding PEG in the community, and that's got to change. Lack of evolution of the product. In many ways, what we are today, other than the fact that we have a website and some stuff on YouTube, is the same way it was 30 years ago. We haven't moved forward with technology. Again, that's got to change. Outdated equipment. The equipment we have, these servers are still standard definition. They don't broadcast in high definition. So again, outdated equipment from a bygone model. Our financial support is uncertain. I'll get more into that later as to where our income comes from. The commission itself has floundered over the last number of years. We've struggled getting new members to fill vacant seats, and in doing that, we've lost a few good members along the way because we couldn't really move forward. And we really haven't had a strategy document or goals up until very recently. Opportunities. We believe we can create relevance through sharing of the resources that we have. We need to realign what it is we do with the expectations of consumers that care about the type of stuff that we have. Lots of opportunities for potential partnerships from different organizations, media outlets, schools, various programs within the schools that can align with what we're trying to accomplish. Threats. lack of awareness. If no one knows we exist or knows anything about what we do, we're irrelevant. Outdated role. We can't be just on charter cable because that model is dying. Volunteer fatigue. We've burned volunteers out in the past, and we need to make sure that we maintain our volunteer board members and any other volunteers that we can attract into working with us. Threat of program discontinuation. That charter channel can go away at any time. It's a blessing we have it, but it's not guaranteed, and we need to make sure that we're prepared for whatever the future might hold. And funding that we get isn't controlled by us. It's based on other entities' willingness to support us, which could change at any time. As a result of the SWOT analysis, these direction items, you could call them, essentially say there are goals. In others speak for strategic planning. There's about 6 or 7 of them that I'm going to quickly go through. So number 1, create sustainability for the PEG Commission. That includes both board and staff. We need to make sure that we attract people to our commission that can basically get down and work on all this stuff. We've got 1 open seat. Ideally, we need somebody who has an interest in this area, is willing to work hard, and also preferably would be a resident of Manistee Township. They are one of our funders and are currently unrepresented on the PEG Commission. Filer Township is another funder, and we do have representation from their township board. Obviously, sustainability funding sources plays a key role in that. Identify audiences of PEG content. We have, and through this process, gone through and kind of looked at different aspects of the type of stuff we do and who likely audiences are. We're fine-tuning that now. But those that are interested in government activities, those that are interested in community events, those that are interested in school K through 12 activities, and then finally media outlets, and I'll touch more on media outlets in a bit. Identifying content and media outlets to display PEG content. So this is 2 phases. One is technology platforms are evolving. We need to get on Facebook video just like we are on YouTube video, and whatever technology platform comes up tomorrow. But also, and this is kind of media partners. I'm mentioning this a bunch of times because it's an important part that we believe of our future strategy. It is, again, I'll take this. Let's say this is a 2-hour meeting. Fortunately, not tonight, unless I talk too much more. There aren't a lot of people that are interested in sitting down and watching a 2-hour meeting. But there are people who are interested in certain sections of it. And that's the role that generally media partners, like the newspaper who generally is here, their job is to take this and distill it into something that's bite-size. There are lots of other media partners other than the newspaper. There's 2 local radio stations, there's online publications. We have this ability, because we're capturing this content, of basically saying, media partner, you don't have to send someone here to sit through a 2-hour meeting. Sit back at your desk and scroll through the video and write stories about it. Produce radio segments about it to get the word about what the government of the people is doing for them and getting that message out there. We're never going to be able to do that ourselves. We're not a media producer. We're just capturing this raw information and trying to make it available to others who then can take it and distill it into the forms that their audience wants. So that's a lot about that topic area. Identify key collaborators, area partners. In our strategy, we've basically categorized partners and potential partners as either tier 1, those that are paying the bucks and basically enabling us to operate. Tier 2 are basically those that aren't paying, but for one reason or another, we consider a partner. And I'll give a couple examples of that. non-paid partnerships. Right now, we capture and broadcast DDA videos, Manistee County Library, and Airport Authority meetings. The common thread of all those is I'm on all of those in some way. I just bring a camera with me and you show it. We're not asking for money because I'm there anyway, but yet it's providing more content to the public that they might be interested in. And what I find interesting from the statistics on YouTube that we do get, our top 2 watched videos are the DDA and the library meetings. Sorry, you're not in the top 2. And I think there are reasons for that. So, we're aligning what we're capturing somewhat based on what we think people will want, but yet we still have to pay the bills. So we pay most attention to our paid partnerships. We give them the prime spots on cable channel. So Filer, who pays us the most, is at 8 p.m. prime time. Manistee Township is at 6 p.m. and your meetings generally show at 10 p.m. You're not a dollar contributor, but you provide lots of services to the PEG Commission, accounting and all those things. So we definitely consider the City of Manistee a Tier 1 partner. And then media partners, which I've already gone into enough. Other things we need to do as goals and actions: reorganize our resources based on who we define as our audience, what our outlets are, and our partnerships. We need to develop a marketing plan because, again, if no one knows we exist, it doesn't matter if we have the best content in the world. We need to get the word out there, and we ultimately need to identify additional funding sources to continue paying the bills. This little chart, which you probably aren't going to be able to read, is kind of a summary of a lot of the things I've just been talking about. On the left-hand side are our 3 types of partners. For the paid and non-paid partners, we're capturing content, which is that middle box, and then we're releasing it via our channels: website, cable access channel, social media, hopefully, and whatever else makes sense. On the bottom, the media partners, they're getting that same content. They're doing what they do to it. They're releasing it to their audiences, and hopefully there's a tie back. So I'll take the newspaper. This is a hypothetical, something we'd wish would happen in the future. The newspaper is writing a story tomorrow about the content of this meeting. It'd be nice if there was a partnership there that in that article or at the end of that article said, if you want to actually see the raw footage of what happened and not just read the synopsis, click here and go to the PEG website. We could do that with other partners. I'm using that example because they're here. And we'd love to do that someday. Second to last slide is we're just starting a process where we are going through our partners and potential partners, and we're basically doing an interview. There's like a 2-page form that we're basically going through. And next month will be the first time we do that, and we're starting with Filer Township. I'm anticipating that later this winter, I will be requesting to come back here at a work session and walk through with you these questions and basically get your input as to what it is you would like to see, you would expect to see, who you think your audience is, and a whole set of other questions. But that's not for tonight. And then lastly, I've talked about this a little bit. Our budget is roughly $15,000 annually, and we get that funding from 3 primary sources: roughly a third from Filer Township, roughly a third from Manistee Township, and roughly a third from the city's subscribers to charter. There's a 15-cent a month fee that is on every charter bill, and that totals about $5,000 a year that comes to PEG Commission. And right now, our expenses are minimal because as we are working through this strategy, we're not really incurring any expenses, and we're kind of saving up our revenue because $15,000 isn't a lot. And let's just say, for example, we decided to go all out on kind of website, complex platform. A fancy website alone could be $30,000. So that could use up multiple years. So we're kind of building a fund balance right now, trying to figure out where we want to spend it as we work through the rest of our strategic planning. Any questions? And
I
did that at about 10 minutes. That's not too bad. I talk very fast, though.
Have you checked with other municipalities that also probably have a PEG channel of their own and see what their commissions are doing? Because some of these problems that you've alluded to
Right.
would be,
Right.
so everybody else would be experiencing.
We did that exercise probably about 3 years ago now, and we kind of divided and conquered with commission members. My assignment was Ludington, so I went down there and met with Ludington. Interesting, in Ludington, their operation is run out of the library, and it kind of falls under the library's responsibility to do. They have a very different funding model. The city of Ludington down there basically doesn't provide any financial support, but it buys all of the equipment they need. So if they need hardware, the city purchases that. Whereas the library kind of provides resources and space and kind of things like that. So that's the model I'm most familiar with because I did that interview. But we also talked to Cadillac, Traverse City, and there were a couple more. So yes, we've done some of that, but not in the last year. It wasn't part of this recent iteration just because we had a limited budget which we were trying to accomplish things in.
Well, do any of these other municipalities partner with schools? Say, I'm thinking outside the box here, West Shore Community College is going to take over the 400 River Street building at some point. Is there any opportunities to do something college-related / cable with them in that building?
Education is one of the areas, and I forget which goal it was under, but that is one of the interest groups. I think we had listed K through 12, but there's no reason it needs to stop at 12, especially with that development happening right in the midst of our downtown.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that could be something
I agree.
could have with somebody about that. That's all the questions I have.
Anybody else?
Do you have you were talking about equipment needs. Do you have a budgeted wish list and about what kind of dollars are we looking at?
Right now, no, because the equipment we have works fine. It's standard definition, but you don't need all of high definition to see things like a meeting. So the question comes in is, where do we want to go? And until we have a clear roadmap laid out, spending or thinking about equipment would be premature.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And comments. Citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or area of city involvement. Citizens in attendance may be recognized by the mayor for comments. Limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Is there any citizens who'd like to make comments tonight on their concerns? Please state your name and address.
Ashlyn Korianik, 378 4th Street, Manistee. I've never stood at this end, so this is kind of weird, but I just wanted to make the announcement that this is my final council meeting. My last day is on Thanksgiving, and I put in my 2-week notice, but I wanted to say thank you to all of you for working with me over the last 3 years. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've learned so much, and this is probably was the highlight of all my weeks. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I really enjoyed learning a lot about local government, and it's given me a whole new perspective. But I wanted to say thank you to the city staff and Thad Taylor for literally always answering my calls whenever I had a question, Chief Kozel for working with me, and Jeff McCula for letting me call him whenever I had a question about anything. So thank you all for working with me, and if you guys have any questions or concerns before then, I will be available. So.
Well, for me speaking, and I think I can speak on behalf of council, you've done a terrific job for us, and we much appreciate it. I don't think I was misquoted once, and that's really great. Thank you for all the time you've spent and all the hard work you've done, and good luck for your future endeavors, which I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Anybody else?
We enjoyed having you. Thanks. We're gonna miss you.
I will miss all of you guys.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, officials and staff. Mr. Taylor.
Nothing at this time.
City Attorney.
Nothing, Your Honor.
City Clerk.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, who's gonna go first? DPW.
So I just wanted to make council and much of the public, aware that I can. We started our annual leaf pickup. We got 3 days into that, and we got a lot of snow, and the snow stayed the next week. We resumed the leaf pickup yesterday, and we'll continue on with that through at least the first week of December, unless we get buried in snow again. We've had a lot of residents concerned because the leaves that were in the street got plowed up into the yards. The first obligation of the Public Works is to keep those streets safe. When we got the first snow on the Friday, Saturday, they went around the piles the best they could, but once we got, over 18 inches of snow, we had to open up the lanes. So there's a lot of leaves out there and a lot of work to do yet, but hopefully with the warm stretch that's coming up, we'll have an opportunity for everybody to bring their stuff back out to the street, and we'll keep picking it up. If the weather doesn't allow us to get through everything this year, then we'll look at scheduling some sort of special pickup in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Public safety.
I just want to remind everybody about alternate parking to go hand in hand with what he's saying. I think that we work pretty well together. When he has those issues, we can get out there and try to give a hand, and I know that's not something that we're already anticipating, but we want to make sure on our alternate. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
Nothing more, Your Honor.
City Engineer?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
That? Presentize. Think I got everybody? Ms. Pontiac?
Had a question with the recycling being moved. Are we having the soil and all that still over at MCC, or is this gonna stay at the?
Yes, we will be putting a bin for topsoil over at MCC, so the soil will still be available to the public. And then we actually have, with the old site, we have a gate that we've stored for years. We plan on installing that gate and using that for additional cold storage for us.
Mr. Grabowski?
It's supposed to be 48, Jeff, coming next week.
I'm praying.
So 2 days in a row they said 48.
Yeah, and a lot of rain though.
Right. Ashley, thanks a lot for the coverage. You did a good job. Thank you.
Mr. Smansky?
I just wanted to pass on, we lost what I believe is probably the oldest veteran in the city of Manistee on the 14th. Steve Silsky was a hero of World War II, 3 Bronze Stars, was in Normandy, a lot of battles that you hear about, the Battle of the Bulge. Again, just kind of recognition of the few World War II veterans that we have left. Just to make sure we're aware and we honor them for their service.
Anything else? Cooper? Speaking.
I would like to get an update on the wastewater treatment plant and the timeline. I know that we're not gonna hit the deadline to get it completed, but I wanna know exactly what's going on as far as negotiating that with the state. Two guys.
Jeff needs back.
So to back up slightly, When we negotiated the timeline for our wet weather corrective action program, we asked them for 2 additional years in order to get through all the design, all the analysis, and the funding cycle. The state required basically a 4-year time frame when we believed it should take 6. The 4 years was because that's the end of our NPDS permit, the current one that we have. So they wanted to create that completion date at the same time that our current permit expired. They told us if it doesn't happen within that time frame, then the next permit cycle, we will add additional dates and give you some leeway, but we can't extend it beyond the current permit. We have proceeded in order to complete that in the 4-year time frame. Everything that we have done possible is to hit that 4-year. The delays have come from the funding source, which is rural development, in obtaining those loans. The process is extremely drawn out, it's extremely detailed. It's taken thousands and thousands of hours to put together the information, to respond. As you heard from the auditor, we've actually had to change how we account for our water and sewer system in order to meet their guidelines and their reporting requirements. We feel pretty confident that in the next, month, 2, that we're going to get obligated for the rural development phase 2, which then sets us in the path, to getting that funding. The rural development phase 1, we've gone through all that. It took, what did we calculate?
About 2 years.
2 years to go from the point where we applied for the funding to the point where they said, you've now completed everything you need to do and you're allowed to advertise that. So our every deadline that's set forth in the NPDS permit, we have hit and we have achieved. We've achieved those even though the state has not responded timely to all of our submittals. The only thing that's holding us up right now is the process to get that financing. So with that said, we're expecting to get obligated for the money this winter, bid it out towards the end of the winter, and then break ground in the spring. What we are doing in the bid documents is we are asking for a price to complete it within the calendar year of 2020 and meet the obligations in our NPS permit. We are also asking for a price if we allowed that to continue into the 2021 construction season, what that price looks like. And we're assuming that it will be much less expensive to go into 2021, but we will have the option to put it together into 1 year and meet those obligations. So we're trying to look at it both ways. We've been, between the city and the engineers, have had conversations with the state almost on a weekly basis for those 2 years. And there does not seem to be any concern from their perspective with the timelines that we've put forward. They certainly understand that they've caused us some delays and that the financing has caused a lot of time.
So are we going to be fined for missing the deadline at all?
I would be very surprised if they did any type of fine.
This is good information because there's a lot of misconception about this out in the public eye. And if we could capture your words in maybe a few sentences less.
Yeah.
To get it out there,
but
that'd be good because
very
it's
complicated. And an MPDS permit is for a 5-year period. When that permit expires, they will not start the new permit process for at least a year after your permit has expired. So you continue to operate the first year of your next cycle under the old permit. Then they negotiate the terms of the new permit. Once it gets approved by the state and the local government, you only have 4 years left in that permit period, and then the cycle starts again.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm hoping to get that message out.
Yeah, and at some point,
video.
I've talked to the district director, And at some point, it may be advantageous to have him come and speak to council and explain the state's view on this, because, I mean, there's no actions being taken by anyone to delay this process. We want to get through this, but it takes a lot, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort to put a $20 million package together.
Okay, thanks.
That said, the rural development phase 1 is out for bids right now. Those bids are being opened December 3rd. So our first 2 phases of the wet weather corrective action program will begin construction in the spring. And so that will continuously, as those projects proceed, they will begin reducing how much water is getting to that plant. The 3rd and 4th phase really are the new pipeline to the plant, and then the storage at the plant itself.
Okay.
I would say the big unknown we have is the size of the rural development loan we're gonna be going after for phase 2 is over $5 million. So it basically goes to Washington DC for a higher level review. So that's a little bit of new ground for us, and even with the state, even with some of the local RD folks in the state. So we're still gonna see how that process goes. That could be the one item I'm a little worried about going into the winter, and how long that takes, but we met directly with Christine Maxwell, the director of the program in Lansing. That's where they identified that we have grant opportunities of around $4 million, and she said she'd do everything to expedite what she can from the state level. So all we can do is just hope to get the package in and get their response back.
You think you'll be going to Washington?
I hope we don't have to do something like that. I guess it's not out of the question. We'd probably want to have some people with us, like senators.
The reason why we broke this into 2 phases was very strategic and at the direction, or really the suggestion of Christine Maxwell. By obligating our phase 1, it puts us in a better position to get the phase 2 funding, and they've assured us that phase 2 funding is in place. Their money is in place.
Okay.
Michigan receives year after year after year awards for obligating all the money that they're allotted in any given year, but then also take money from other states that they don't have projects to support and bring it back to Michigan. So we're confident we'll get that funding.
So what I think I hear you saying is that pending the approval of the money, we're right on track.
We are behind what we want to be for the construction schedule. We would have loved to have started construction a couple months ago, so that contractors could work over the winter time and then have the full season next year.
But you're still within that 4-year cycle, right?
We still are,
Yeah.
right. And when we take bids, we will take one that complies with that MPDS schedule, and then we'll take one that extends out that schedule, and that will help make a financial decision for the city, but it also has impact on how the state looks at those timelines and whether or not they grant an extension to us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have anything? Nothing? Okay, it's beginning to look a little bit like Christmas around Manistee. DPW has been doing a really neat job of kind of getting that Christmas spirit going. Everything is looking good, and please extend my thank you, and I'm sure council's thank you to the boys that are working so hard to make it look like Christmas around here. So much appreciated. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Got a motion?